Good morning.
Morning.
I am very happy to be here at St. Augustine's. I've been here all summer. At some point, we'll get a chance to talk about all that good stuff. I very much appreciate the warm welcome and the open minds and hearts that exist here at St. Augustine. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my first experience as I move through this journey in hopes to become an ordained deacon and follow some very big shoes. Well, she said she was tall. But so dinner parties in Jesus' time were far more than events where people got together to share a meal and good company. There was a prescribed etiquette then that governed the serving of guests in the home. Meals were ways these ancient people encoded and enforced the strict social divisions, if you will, of their times. In other words, who got invited, where and with whom you sat, and even what you were fed. That basically told the whole story of who was who and who was not. At that time, the guest list of these parties would include people from the different levels of affluence and influence. Depending on who you were fed either the most expensive and exquisite food of the time, or you were fed with a paltry meal. Those who had favorite status got the best wine, and those who didn't got light wine, which was more like drinking vinegar. The food and beverage measured the friendship of your host. But let's fast forward 2016 years. How many of us could see ourselves in the parable Jesus told in today's scripture? Where would you see yourself in that house? I want you to close your eyes. Just go with me. Close your eyes for a minute. Picture yourself in that time. And as I look around the room, there are people still looking at me that don't have their eyes closed. So, that's a telltale sign that I can see you. Does it matter to you? Does it matter where you're sitting? See, for us, it's a little easier than the people of that time because we know who Jesus is now. So if we were invited to that house, do we really care where we would be sitting because we knew we were in the presence of Jesus? You can open your eyes now. Or you can leave them closed and just listen to my sultry voice. So we've all gone to that wedding, right? Where you approach the table card, seating table card, table. With such anticipation of where we're going to be seated, that we've set an expectation for ourselves about how enjoyable our night will be. Anybody willing to admit that they've done that? Right, you walk in, seating chart, where am I sitting? Right, how's my night gonna go? How close am I to the head table? How close am I to the dance floor? How close am I to the bar? You go through the line thinking to yourself about what your relationship is to the couple, and that where you are seated is somehow a gauge as to your importance in their lives. If your expectation is not met, your night begins on a real low, and you might even commiserate with your friends or fellow table mates, right? Isn't that what happens at a wedding? Right? Even though you have all these other relatives and friends there, you've got your table. So how do we fit in this social environment? But it's silly, isn't it? It's not about us, it's about them. It's their day, but as humans, our egocentric self, we want to feel good and be recognized regardless of, it's just a simple seating card. But we make more of it. We make more of it than it needs to be. But those are our social mores, and those are the things that make us different now in this time than in the ancient time. It's not so different, is it? My son Rob just got married. He's coming up on a year, Labor Day weekend. Calls me one night. I mean, he was only a month out from the wedding. And he said, Dad, he said, you know, I've got a problem. And I'm, you know, so if you're a dad in the room, married off your oldest son, what's the first thing, you know, comes to mind is, well, the cold feet conversation maybe. Money, maybe number two. Not sure. It was. Who said it? Raise your hand if you said seating arrangement. Thank you. So not the female perspective. Why? Because you already have all the answers. You know? Right? Your seating plan is the best. It's the most exquisite. Everybody's going to be happy. There won't be any issues because you know best. And you do most of the time. But he doesn't know. He's 29 years old. He and Tara, completely in love. They're doing it right. However, he's got the mother-in-law who has all the answers. And he's distraught over this. He really is distraught. And here was his problem. She wanted all of her relatives and friends close to the head table, and you know, slowly but surely, Rob started to notice that his family and friends were getting pushed back. And he was like, I don't know what to do. He goes, I don't want to cause a fight. Tara's upset, she doesn't know what to do. Mom won't acquiesce in any way. He said, I don't know what to do. So, having had this experience, fortunately or unfortunately, more than once, I had learned in my life humility very, very early on. And my advice to him was, you know what, Rob? Put your friends and family the furthest away in the room, but all together. Give us the back row of tables against the back wall. It's not going to matter, trust me. It's all going to work out. Let it go and just make it happen. So that story, I tell you because of the experience. But that night, same thing, right? Everybody comes, they're all looking at the seating cards, and everybody's jockeying around, and all that worked out. And I'm just sitting back, watching the whole thing unfold. But when everything was said and done, because we were all together in the back of the hall and enjoying ourselves and celebrating the kids, that's where the party ended up. It didn't end up there. It ended up where everybody was commiserating and having fun. And then it just turned into a great night for everybody. But it's hard to let that stuff go, especially if you're a 29-year-old. But I learned that humility at a young age, and I was able to give my son that very small lesson. But it carries forward in a lot of different things in life. And we're going to get to the meat of that very shortly. But as a boy growing up on a farm in western Cranston, I learned humility at a very young age, learning to drive a tractor at 8, farming 100 acres of farmland. And at the very mature age of 12, being set in front of 10 acres of the most beautiful tomato plants that you would ever want to see, and being told, you're going to weed those by hand. Not once, but weekly. It's a humbling experience for anybody, but more especially for a 12-year-old. Now, I don't say that in a negative way because I had the greatest childhood anyone could even think. But it was a lesson well learned. And it's carried forward in my life. So humility. How many of us have experienced humility? How many of us have been humbled at one time or another? And depending on how we function and where we sit in our egocentric selves in life, I bet you we've been humbled more than once. And how many of us have experienced humility so profound that it changed you or your life and the way that you treat people from that day forward? Blessed if you've had that experience, is what I would say. Understanding the difference between being humble and having humility are important lessons to learn. And I would boldly say most people find them hard lessons to learn. I suppose that Jesus had witnessed some jockeying for position and seating around himself pretty often, particularly as his popularity grew. He watched people who had forgotten some fundamental rules of decorum and hospitality. He seized the instance in this parable to teach the greater lesson, that we find our best selves in humility and sacrificial service, and ultimately so very much depends upon how we treat and live with one another. We are called to humility. In humility there is obedience, and the obedience is our own reward. The knowledge that we have fulfilled God's purpose for our lives is an assurance of tranquility of our soul and spirit, but it's not a down payment on premium seating. The beautiful part of today's scripture is that it reminds us that as children of God, we are called to live lives of humility and sacrificial service. We're called to live those lives right now, today, among the homeless, the discriminated, the broken, and all those less fortunate than us, who want more than anything to just be included, wanted, and accepted. That's the difficult part for us. Let that egocentric self go and do it something for somebody else. Unconditional. Unconditional. There's not going to be any thank you at the end. There's not going to be anybody there to say, attaboy. Do it because you want to do it. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because you're going to help somebody else's life. Jesus is teaching us, inviting us. He's praying for us to put our dislike and our fear, our prejudice and judgment last, and to choose love first. Jesus is teaching us to make his way of loving first in our hearts, and to use that way as the basis for any and all guest lists we will ever make, or look at, or be part of again. Jesus is teaching us to leave that egocentric self. Give up the presumption of privilege, because it was never really ours for the taking. But that privilege is always given by God. God knows that we are people who almost always forget that it's he who is the life of the party. God knows our unworthiness, but even so, when all is said and done, our worthiness is not the thing that matters most to God. The scripture readings today invite us to recognize that our worth and the worth of all people are not measured by the judgment of our peers or the social standards of the world, regardless of social structure. Exercise humility to understand and accept that although we are all unworthy, we are all still chosen. And although we are full of pride and judgment, first, last, and always, we are God's children. I want to end with a quote that is credited to our namesake here, St. Augustine. Do you wish to rise? Then begin by descending. You plant a tower that will pierce the clouds? Lay first the foundation of humility. St. Augustine. Thanks be to God.